Yay. I'm ready.
As ready as I'm gonna get.
We're ready. All right. I think we're live, everyone, if you can hear us or see us. If you can, give us a shout out in the Meet Our Contributors Slack channel. Anyway, welcome to February's edition of Meet Our Contributors. This is a Kubernetes upstream endeavor. We like to be very helpful to our contributors, and since we have 40,000 of them, one-on-one mentoring just isn't possible because of math. And that's how that works. So what we're here to do is every month we answer questions from both aspiring and current contributors. We have an esteemed, awesome panel of mentors here. We have Matt, Nikita, Paul. We have Chris Short streaming for us today in lieu of George, who is ill. Get well, George, if you're out there listening. And that's our welcome. So first things first, of course, we have a code of conduct. The TLDR is to please be excellent to each other. If you're looking to read our code of conduct, it is in the root of the community folder. You can find a link there. That's Kubernetes/community on GitHub. And that also goes for folks who are asking questions and chatting on our platforms, as well as the panelists. And then let's get right into intros. And then after that, we'll have some quick announcements, and then we'll jump right into the show. Cool. How's everybody today? All right.
Doing well.
Yes. All right.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So Paul, you're first. Who are you? Tell us.
That is a good question. I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. Yeah, I'm Paul Mori. I work for Red Hat. I've been working on Kubernetes somehow since 2014. These days, I'm the chair of the multi-cluster SIG and do some other stuff in the ecosystem. Been working a lot on this Knative project. EOF.
Where did you first start contributing to Kubernetes when you started, since you're like a vet?
So I think I was actually thinking about this a little bit earlier today. I think the first pull request I cut had to do with exposing environment variables to a pod for the services that were in the namespace.
That sounds like a noble cause.
It does sound like a noble cause. Unfortunately, I think that I took maybe a little bit longer than I had expected to. And the one very clear memory that I have was one Eric Toon being like, "Is this done yet? Like, I want it and I'm waiting for it." So yeah, other than that, I did some of the early like app dev type of stuff, like secrets and config maps and a little bit of security, a little bit of storage stuff, this and that.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, I like a good Whitman sampler for my software development experience.
That sounds like Nikita. Nikita, who are you? You should tell us about your sampler.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikita. I work at a startup called Lutzer remotely all the way from India. I am a member of the Kubernetes steering committee. I'm also the technical lead for a SIG contributor experience, and I also participate in other SIGs like testing, release, working group kits, and for a little bit of API machinery.
See, that's sample.
And yeah, that's kind of pretty much it for me, I guess. Yeah, like I dabble a little bit in everything.
Also the same question then. Well, where did you first start, dabbler?
I started with API machinery. So I think it was 2017, so not as old as Paul.
Just like a nice light appetizer with that API machinery, right?
Yeah.
At the time there were no CRDs, so I started with CRDs. So I was a Google Summer of Code intern, and that's how I got into Kubernetes upstream. And I worked on CRDs, the validation and the sub resources for them, and now they've grown out to be really huge. So that was awesome. And yeah, so that's how I got into it. And then I realized I could do other stuff as well, and I really loved being part of the community. So I stuck around even after my internship, and I've been doing all sorts of things.
Awesome. And that touched on one of my announcements, which was Google Summer of Code. If there are any current contributors listening on the line right now, I guarantee your SIG has a scoped project that is waiting in their issues. Please let us know so that we can get you a Google Summer of Code intern. We've had so much success with Google Summer of Code. Let us know. Go to the Kubernetes dev mailing list for more information there. Matt, who are you?
Hi, my name is Matt. I work for a company called Flatiron Health in New York, which actually isn't really in the Kubernetes space. We are an oncology data company. The mission is to improve the lives of cancer patients by learning from the experience of every cancer patient. So Kubernetes is kind of more of a nights and weekends type of project for me. I'm just contributing to it. I apologize, I'm a tiny bit sick, so hopefully that won't be too much of a disruption. My start in Kubernetes was actually kind of similar to Nikita's. I started doing it in college. I did an undergraduate thesis in distributed systems, and kind of the topic that I explored was predictive autoscaling for the horizontal pod autoscaler. And that was kind of like a cool way to get involved with the community. It happened that one of the professors in my department was like grad school roommates with Brendan Burns, I think. There was some connection. So he ended up being like a reviewer on the thesis, and kind of was a great resource in getting introduced to the community. And then kind of since I graduated, I have looked to kind of remain in the project again, mostly through kind of like nights and weekends. Contributions mostly focused on SIG-Node is where I spent most of my time.
Yes, Nodester. Awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you, for your time today. As you can see, all three of you have different experiences and different backgrounds, and even where you contribute. So much thank you. Any other announcements that we have for the upstream community? One is that the Contributor Summit for Amsterdam registration is now open. This event, yes, it usually sells out. Please, if you are a aspiring, because yes, we do have a new contributor workshop on site, or a current contributor that wants to participate in things like unconferences and how to be better code reviewers and stuff like that, please register. Again, that's Kubernetes dev mailing list. That's the most major, I think, announcement that we have. So let's get right into the questions. The first question was actually already addressed in your intros, which is, how did you get involved in Kubernetes? But the second follow-up question to that is, why do you stick around? Why not other projects? It sounds like, Paul, maybe you already have gone on to some other ecosystem projects, but why Kubernetes? Why do you contribute here versus other places, other projects? Whoever
Well,
wants.
I like it.
Yeah?
That's
like
a pretty good reason, right? Like, so to just elaborate, like, we've got a pretty fantastic community, and I'm certainly not someone that's like participated in every open source project ever, but the community is great. Like, I regularly have the thought that like there's a lot of folks in our community that are really interested in building others up and helping others out, and I think that's pretty cool. The technology is also pretty cool. Like if you think about the scope of just what the core of Kubernetes does, it's pretty wild, pretty interesting challenges, pretty interesting technology, and just lots of fun.
It is. Matt,
I
what about
agree. And also, I just want to add, on to that is that, like, I always say community, and I still maintain that it's community. But one of the selfish reasons was also that I get to learn a lot. Like, I mean, I started as a college in my undergrad, so it was super helpful to just pick up new concepts and everything. So that's kind of a selfish reason, I'd say.
That is not a selfish reason. That's a reason we hear from a lot of contributors. I bet that has to do with Matt as well. Matt, you probably had that similar experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like Nikita said, a lot of room to kind of learn, and then I also think that there's been a lot of room to kind of grow in the project, and that's been very cool. And then I think for me, like Paul said, really interesting technical problem, and one that has a lot of different ways to kind of dive into it. So it's been nice to kind of, I think there's an advantage to like sticking with a project for a long time. So being able to stick with Kubernetes and still have new opportunities, still have new things to learn, still be really interested in it as I was when I started has been fantastic.
And I have the same feels. I feel like I learn every day. That's why I'm still here. And that's why we're continue to be here. So it's a vast ecosystem where we're making stuff up every day. So next question is always a famous question, which is, yes, I've read the contributor guide. I've done my environment setup. I've looked at some good first issues and some help wanted labeled issues. What's next for me here?
What seems the most fun is the best advice I can give people looking for stuff to do. If you don't know where to start, what seems interesting, and what's fun for you, and like what's a stretch. Like things might seem like, oh, I can't do it, but if I can do it, you can do it. Probably better than me.
No, the fun is definitely a key factor here, especially with 40 different groups to pick from. Like, Nikita, what about you? It's like, yes, we have the contributor guide. Now what?
I'd say, yeah, I mean, if you've already looked at good first issues and help wanted issues, I think the next step is to show up in meetings and in the 6 Slack channels and like listen, and not just ask people what to work on, but just look around and see what people are working on. And then if you find something that sounds fun to you, like Paul said, then reach out to those folks and ask if you can help. This can also still be a little intimidating to folks and a little unstructured. So another would probably do. So during the start of the release cycle, most SIGs usually plan what features they want to work on. SIG Storage does this really well. They have a spreadsheet with the feature topic title that they want to work on, with like what's the status in after like every month or so, and who's working on it, and it's brilliant. So and other SIGs have other methods, but they do have systems in place. So if you show up then and see what features the SIG is planning to work on, or if you want some feature to be implemented, this is a good time to show up and say that you want to work on it, or just ping people who are working on certain features that you'd like to help it. So yeah, I think that's a good place to jump in.
Nikita with awesome onboarding advice. If y'all ever need onboarding advice, Nikita is it. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I actually did this maybe a year ago of like kind of not being involved very tangentially in Kubernetes, but wanting to be a lot more like heavily involved, and kind of sat down and had a very, I guess, kind of planned thought process of how I helped to get more involved. And a couple of the things that I thought about was like restricting my focus. I think that Kubernetes can be such a huge and like overwhelming project. I basically
It's a
sat down and
super
said,
good one.
I'm going to focus on Sig Node, and everything outside of that is fantastic, but I'm not going to try and like keep up about what's going on or whatever. I'm just going to really focus on Sig Node. And that kind of made it a lot more accessible and less overwhelming. And then the next step for me after that, and just in terms of like the first couple of days of the first couple of months of getting involved, was there's a great blog post from Steve Klabnik on being like an open source gardener. And he talks about some kind of like non-code ways to get involved. So triaging issues, doing pull requests, stuff like that. I found that was a really useful way to kind of get a broader sense of what was going on in the SIG. And then I think my final piece of advice is kind of like, from when I started, I set myself the goal of I'll work on this for an hour a day and like essentially check in a couple of months and see how it goes. But until that point, I want to put in that hour. And I think that that was really useful too, to kind of like carve aside that time and find that stuff was able to progress from there. So those are kind of my three big pieces of advice I'd give to someone new is specifically the focus one too. Like just like it's super overwhelming if it's not constrained down to a much more manageable thing.
100.
So I noticed while we're talking about this that I think we've got like 3 developer personality types on the panel today, but you do not have to be a developer to contribute to Kubernetes. You don't have to be able to code. You don't have to write code. There's so much
maybe
that
Markdown.
like,
It's Markdown
yeah.
code. Yeah.
It counts as contribution. Code, that's for smarter people than me to debate. But there is no need to be a developer or even be interested in doing development personally to contribute. Like there's so many other things to do. So another one that I thought of while we were talking is, docs are really important. Like it doesn't matter how good the feature is if the doc doesn't tell you how to use it. So like things like finding ways to improve docs are really, really valuable. Finding things that aren't tested that you want to add tests for. It doesn't all have to be feature stuff. There's a lot of other really valuable stuff.
Yes. I think joining SIG meetings, you get to know what that valuable stuff is right away when you're like, oh, wow, they don't have this X thing. Like, oh, they don't have a project board, stuff like that. Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to plus one Paul's point and thank him for making it. I think it's a super strong one and very, very important.
It is indeed very important. Everybody knows that even when you work for a company that you need more than just developers to run a business. So this is not necessarily a business, so to speak, but it definitely has all those support functions for sure. And also plus one to Paul, thank you for bringing that up. So the next one is on a sort of a meta mentoring topic, which is, yes, it is hard to find a mentor one-on-one. What are some of the resources or other helpful things that you found on your journey that weren't necessarily other humans? Was it certain docs that you discovered that were super helpful? Was it like a maybe Slack channel? Was there anything that was a surprise to you as far as being very helpful along your journey?
Well, for me, I I've learned a lot in my career from just reading code on the internet. Like as a developer personality type, I still learn stuff every day. Every time I go into the cube code. No comment on how often it's code that I wrote that I'm learning from. Oops.
Well, you learn from yourself, right? Nikita, what about you?
Yeah, I can add on to that a little bit. So one of the things that definitely helped was reading code, and I mean the way I read code, which wasn't anything new, is using git blame a lot. So that helped me like figure out the commit message, and even if the commit messages did not contain too much useful info, it usually has a link to the pull request that added the code. And the pull request usually has way more context, and like the review comments are super helpful to understand why a certain code is written in a particular way. And if you don't understand something, find the person who wrote the review, or maybe the author of the PR, and ping them on Slack, or maybe even on like the Stick channel, and just ask generally. But especially in the beginning of my contributing journey, I used to ping people a lot and ask a lot of questions. I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed at the number of questions I was asking, but I think that really helped me. So I would suggest people to do that. Even now, people don't get annoyed if you're asking questions at all. So I mean, if they're like really about a particular topic, they will not get annoyed. So feel free to ask questions as well.
What are some of the places? Where are some of those places that you would ask those questions?
Oh yeah, good question. So you have the SIG Slack channel where you can definitely ask. There is also the SIG mailing lists. If you don't want to use Slack, if it's especially a broad discussion, you can open it on the mailing list. Also show up in SIG meetings or meet our contributors. Or if it's user focused, you can also go to office hours. There's also discuss.kates.io, which is more forum-like, and you can post your questions there as well. I hope I'm not forgetting other avenues.
If you did, I forgot them too. So
I have a question for Nikita.
Yeah.
Sure.
So do you think it would be better if instead it was called Git Hold Accountable?
Oh yeah, Git credit would be nice.
There you go.
I don't like the Git blame command, but yeah, Git credit would be nice.
Git credit is a
something
good
that's
one. That is a good one. Matt, what about you? Other helpful resources that weren't necessarily like assigned mentors or assigned people to help you? I think Matt might be frozen, or maybe it's me. That could be a very good possibility as well.
You're not frozen. You're very much alive.
Very much
I
alive.
like Git credit.
All right, well, Matt's frozen then. All right, now we have some questions from some current contributors in my inbox. One of them is looks like currently active contributor. Want to know some strategies that you all have with trying to get an idea passed that has some dissent already. So they have an idea and they've opened a PR. It's got some dissent, especially from some of the folks in owners' files. However, they think it's a great idea. Clearly, great. What are some strategies that you would do in this situation?
That's a really good question. So the key to finding consensus on those things, I think, is finding what parts you have consensus on. Like, there's so many experiences in my career, not just in Cube, where a lot of developer personality types tend to exhibit this behavior of like they work until they find where they disagree and then they're happy. And sometimes that can, like, the the parts of an idea that we don't agree on can tend to take on like an outsized size relative to the things that you do. So anytime you are in that situation, it's helpful to take a step back and say, are we agreeing on 80% of something here? And like the 20% is what is attracting the most attention because it's the most exciting because we get to fight about it or argue about it. Not that developers like to do that. I mean, that's crazy. But a lot of times there's a nucleus of an idea that people do agree about, but they're maybe don't see eye to eye yet on every element of it or some of the details. And a lot of times you can get far by just focusing on what you do agree on.
Paul, that was excellent, heartfelt advice. Thank you.
Can you hear me again? Am I on?
You're back. Yes. Welcome back, Matt.
I think Paul makes a really good point. I think also, this is kind of something I learned at my job at Flatiron, but I think I try and bring to Kubernetes is thinking about who's the customer at the end of the day and like, what are you trying to accomplish? And at the end of the day, how is this decision going to serve the customer? Whether that be someone who's using Kubernetes or a cluster administrator or whatever. But I found that kind of just that like customer-centric focus can be kind of really helpful for resolving certain issues or at least bringing in new viewpoints that can kind of like move the discussion along.
That's good stuff. That's good.
That is really good. Yes. That's a good question. I really liked this question. Nikita, what about you in consensus building?
I think Paul and Matt covered everything here.
Hey, I'm still learning.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, we are all humans and we are all learning how to build consensus. Like that's
Hey, I didn't say that.
We are all learning. All right. Next question here. All right. Another reviewer wants to know how to ask to be an approver. Says they feel kind of weird asking. I mean, and some context here for folks that are watching too, by the way. I'm sorry, I don't think I've been giving a lot of context for folks that are watching. We have this thing called owners files in our code base. Those owners files have people's names in it, just like Paul, Nikita, Matt, in areas like reviewers, meaning people who are reviewing the pull requests that come in, and then approvers, people who are saying, yep, this is in, it's getting merged, it's good to go. And that's our contributor ladder. Sorry for not giving context there. So this individual is currently a reviewer in an owner's file somewhere, TBD, and they've been on the project for a while. They would like to be an approver, but don't know how to have that kind of a conversation. They're saying that the approvers don't have the conversation currently. So what's next for them? What would you do if you were them?
I try to remember that if you're in an owner's file as an approver and you're actively executing the role, like you are helping. It is help. Like it is it's a lot more than a merit badge if you execute the role. So and I think I picked up on this thing from the community where like there's a lot going on and people are like really busy and stuff. So helping to share the review burden, I think a lot of folks will welcome. If you're a little nervous about, maybe you're not sure if you've demonstrated enough contribution that you feel like you deserve to be in the owner's file, you can do a couple things. You can look for feedback and say, I was thinking about, am I in a place where you would feel comfortable with me being an approver? And if not, what do you need to see from me for that feeling to change? And you can also do this thing that I do every time I go parasailing, which I love, but I am terribly afraid of actually doing before I do it, where you just say like YOLO and you do it.
I just wanted to come off mute to laugh at that. YOLO. All right. YOLO. I want to be an approver today. YOLO.
There's no downside to asking, in my opinion.
There isn't. I think stating intentions is good too. People want to know if you're going to stick around and if you're trustworthy. And if you say, "Hey, I want to be an approver," and I'm like, "I've been here for a year already, and I want to do it again for another year." I think those things are very helpful. What about Nikita or Matt? What about you all? What do you think this person's next step should be?
I agree. So like I was in the same shoes a long time, a few months ago, and I was also very confused about how to phrase it. I think I phrased it around something like that I want to be an approver, and at some point, if not now, and what steps I could take to get there. And then folks were like, "Hey, we could just add you as an approver right now." So that worked out. But even if like that does not happen, you do get some actionable feedback about what you can do, and then you can revisit it after a few months, like, "Hey, I did all of this," and I'll ask for feedback again. Another thing I found really helpful is that usually whenever you open a PR to add yourself as an approver, you require LGTMs or approvals from the existing approvers. I've found it useful to ping the existing approvers, at least some of them personally, for them, like those who have worked with mainly, and then ask them if they're okay with kind of sponsoring the approval for adding as an approver. And if like majority of them are okay, then I just YOLO it sort of and create the PR and then see if others are okay with it as well.
Excellent advice for those that are just joining us, whether you're joining from Twitter or Slack or the Kubernetes Dev mailing list email. This is Upstream Kubernetes Mentors on Demand. We are here to help aspiring and current contributors. Matt, did you have any response, or your most response to that?
I think Nikita and Paul did a great job. The one thing I'd add is that I actually think Kubernetes does a very nice job of saying, like, here are kind of the expectations for a reviewer, and here are the expectations of an approver with respect to like how many pull requests you have and what type of pull requests and stuff like that. Which is actually something that I really appreciated when I came to the project. I felt like there was fairly clear expectations outlined of what needed to be done. So just kind of remembering that. And then the other thing I'd toss out is like, if you're nervous about asking, my strong guess is the people who are approvers are very eager to get people to share the code review load. So it's almost certainly going to be appreciated to kind of share that out. So just another thing to maybe help make it a little less stressful.
Yes, that was awesome. That was another really great question. Thank you. All right, so current contributor is actively engaged in a specific SIG. They said that they actually want to see what life is like in other SIGs. What are some things going on in your world where they can jump right into it? So I guess talk to me about one thing that's currently going on in any of the SIGs that you're working on that needs more contributors.
So many things.
I know. So many things.
Just one thing that springs to my mind, like that just sprang to my mind immediately, was the approval plugin. But I don't know if you're like putting it up for the Google Summer of Code internship.
No, talk about it anyway. Talk about it regardless.
So Paris mentioned about owners files and having reviewers and approvers. the way this all works, or the GitHub automation is set up, is we have a test infra repo, and it has something called as Prow, P-R-O-W. And there is a plugin, Prow plugin, called the approval plugin, which helps in managing all this automation for reviewers and approvers, and automatically suggesting approvers, and like the whole system. The approval plugin was written ages ago, and it does not, and we want to make some changes to it. Particularly, we want to introduce file level approval. So right now you can specify approvers for a current directory, but you can't say that these many folks can approve only this file, and the second set of folks can approve only the other file. To have that functionality, we'll need to introduce lots of changes in the approval plugin, but it's not easy to do that in its current form. There are also I wouldn't say very few tests, but we could have more tests. And everyone's really scared to make changes, in like if they break something, it's going to be really dangerous because we don't want to get any malicious code in. So I think like the first step here would be to get more tests in and get a plan of action about how we're going to refactor everything, which is a huge task. I think it's a big feature to work on, and we definitely need someone who would not a drive-by contributor, someone who would stick around. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, please ping us and say contributor experience. And everyone, the whole project will be thankful to you.
That's a great point. A great point is if you are a current contributor right now and looking for other things like engineering productivity, we need you. Think about how we can make this better together, right? We have tons of people in SIG testing and SIG Contribex that work on workflows and things like that. If that interests you, please see us. We can always use support, literally always. Matt, what about you? What's going on in Node that might need some help and support?
Yeah, good question. I actually don't know that I would point to one specific project or.
Okay, that's fine.
Qualify to say that.
Yeah.
What I would say is drop by either the SIG Node Slack or join the weekly meeting, which I think is 1 p.m. on Tuesdays. And that'll kind of have the latest and greatest information from folks more knowledgeable than I about what the best route is.
Well, are you working on any PRs right now? Or wow, if I had 2 people on this.
Yeah, good question. One thing loosely on my mind that I've been chatting with some other folks about is kind of what is the role of Docker and the kubelet, and how do we make that kind of a little bit more like some of the other container runtimes. So that's something I've been kind of poking away at some proof of concept stuff for, and then also hope to release a KEP soon. And potentially, could have a better answer for where contributors could get involved at that point once that's a little further along.
It's a little hard to give advice without knowing more about the individual's interest.
Yeah.
But I can give a meta suggestion of, I think that there are probably a number of SIGs where the desire of the group to do X or Y thing exceeds the group's capacity to do everything that they want. So if you're interested in a particular area, the nice thing about our community is that you can just go and listen and kind of maybe get a feel for what maybe the group has an appetite to do, but not the energetic bandwidth to accomplish right at the moment. So finding those things that are we really want to do it, but we just don't have the bandwidth is a good way to kind of tap into the group psyche and see where there's work to be done that needs people.
Boom, Paul with the mic drop.
Bam.
Bam. Paul asked Nikita.
Pow!
Damn, Paul asked Nikita
Pow!
a question. Let me get the damn thought out, Paul.
I'm sorry.
So Paul asked.
That's hard.
Oh my goodness, this is it. This is Paul Morey, everyone. This is Paul in Zoom calls on SIG meetings. Nikita or Matt, did you have questions for each other? Yeah, I see Matt. I see Matt going, ooh. Nikita, are you dying to know anything about Node? Paul, are you dying to know anything about Node? Matt, are you dying to know anything about API machinery or service catalog?
I have one question about Node.
Okay.
Oh, but you can go ahead first.
No, you go ahead first, and I'll ask my question after.
I think you're a reviewer for SigNode. So what was your journey like to become a reviewer? It's a kind of a very generic and broad question, but what was your journey like to become a SigNode reviewer?
Yeah, kind of what I outlined. I think when I got started, I just tried to, well, essentially review every PR that I saw come into SigNode, and if I modulo the ones where I had truly no idea what was going on, and then I kind of think about, this is something I should learn more about when I have the time. And then eventually had done enough of those and kind of had done enough, a lot of times those kind of suggested code contributions as well, because I notice aspects of the code that could do improvement or to-dos or whatever through that review process. And I guess eventually I felt comfortable kind of asking to be a reviewer, and found the community very receptive to that when I did. Can I ask my question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I know I couldn't get off mute fast enough. I was like one of those like, oh gosh, no, backward. Like, go ahead, Matt.
I think for Nikita, I think that it's very, you're always someone I've, from emails and whatnot, kind of really admired for how involved in the community you are. One of my curiosity things would be like, what's keeping you up at night the most around Kubernetes? Like, what are kind of your biggest areas of concern for the project? And I think, again, you kind of have a unique viewpoint based on my understanding of the different work that you're involved in.
That's a really good question.
That is a good question. This is good.
There are a bunch of aspects. So some of them are kind of people related, I would say, and some of them would be technical. And this is nothing new. Like, this is being talked about a lot of times before, but technical wise, we are growing way too fast. We definitely have to be more stable, get our APIs more stable, and we are making progress towards it, but it's a work in progress. So I think that's one of the things that I definitely want to work more towards too, getting it all more stable and more streamlined. Another people related, I would say, sustainability, and this is something that I've been thinking from like a steering hat perspective too. And even like Paris has been doing a lot of work in that area. We have a sustainability problem in Kubernetes, and like that's nothing new. Like most folks know about it. We have lots of experienced folks in the project. We have a huge influx of new contributors, but we are also working on getting a mentorship program set up, so that's helping, but it's still hard. Scalable mentoring is still hard, and making sure that all this knowledge is passed down to new contributors, and helping reviewers and increasing the number of reviewers and approvers is kind of important too. So I think like I'm rambling here, but I think sustainability is something that I think about a lot, because that's kind of really important for the future of the project.
Cool, thank you. That's a great answer.
Well, this has been a really good session today. I Yeah, no, people are
Quality sesh.
Yeah, quality sesh with the.
I have one more question, by the way.
Yeah, no, shoot, please.
I have a lot of trouble with this. How do you all manage time with like all the GitHub notifications and so many reviews? And Matt, you mentioned you work night and weekends. So how do you manage time to get that all in? Or how do you manage your notifications? Anything you want to answer?
Yeah, so what I do, like I said, I don't work on Kubernetes for my full-time job, so it's a bit of a different experience. I essentially have all of my Kubernetes email go to a separate email, and then I actually don't work nights and weekends. I work mornings and weekends. So before I go to work in the morning, I'll wake up, make my coffee, make my breakfast, and then try and get in about an hour of Kubernetes work. And typically that starts with kind of following up on all the notifications I've got from the night before or the day before. And then if I kind of have extra time once that is done, working on larger projects. That being said, I think that I am probably getting less notifications than you are. So,
or you're just creating time, clearly. So.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure if
I agree.
Work, but for the volume of SIG node right now, which is maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 new pull requests a day, it's fairly.
That's a lot.
Yeah. That's how I approach it, and so far I have managed to keep my head above water. We'll see to what extent that continues. But again, another thing is like I try and be very kind of diligent with my notifications, and like I actually don't have the Kubernetes Slack on my phone. I don't have the email going to any email that I have on my phone or anything like that. So basically, when I work on Kubernetes, I'm working on it. But then other than that, it's not really coming in.
Well, it also sounds like what you're saying is you evaluate it too, right? Like I'm hearing like, oh, I'm going to evaluate my workload at some point and then probably do something about it if it's over, right? Like if you look at your schedule for like say the next couple of weeks and you decide, wow, I'm very much overwhelmed right now. What are some things that you do to help you with that?
Yeah, so I think I'm kind of in a bit of an interesting position with Kubernetes where, again, probably in contrast to some of you folks, I think my contributions are kind of like nice to haves for SIG-Node at this point. There's no like critical 1.18 features that are being counted on me to develop or stuff like that. So there's a little bit less of like, if I'm sick, like I was Monday, I just don't do any code review that day and life goes on kind of.
That's a good point too.
But it's I guess, again, I'm not like the lead of any SIG, or I'm not being counted on for like super critical things. I don't know if the calculus kind of changes for people who are, but that's a bit of how I deal with it right now.
Well, everybody's got to take care of themselves. And what I'm hearing from Matt is a lot of pace yourself and have boundaries. And I think that's really good advice. Like, you're sure not going to give your best reviews or your best contributions or your best if you're sleep deprived or if you're sick or whatever. So I can only plus one what Matt said. I think that that you've got to take care of yourself. So don't think that you can do it all. Like, nobody can. Like I can't tell you how many like elders and key people in the project have expressed to me before that it's just like it's too much to keep up with, even if it is your full-time job and then some. So speaking from personal experience, I would say if the choice is like sift through GitHub notifications or get your sleep and do it when you're fresh.
Or sleep. We need that. That is a
eat your breakfast.
That is a shirt waiting to happen. GitHub notifications or sleep. Get your sleep. Like,
Get your sleep. Get your 3 squares.
Yeah, get your green squares some other time.
No, get your 3 square meals a day, people.
Oh, 3 square. I thought you said green squares, as in like GitHub.
Yeah.
Green
squares can wait.
Yeah.
3 squares can't.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to toss out, I think that that's one area that like focus has really helped me as well, especially with someone who's, again, I try and do the 1 hour consistently, but very rarely do I go beyond that 1 hour. Like I'm not going to be able to keep track of SIG node and SIG storage and SIG network and blah, 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 right? By kind of committing myself to like, I'm just going to focus on SIG node, it really cuts down on the amount of things that are coming in and I'm trying to process. So I guess another kind of argument for being comfortable focusing on a specific part of the project and not feeling like you need to know everything that's going on because it's way too big.
I call it the shiny object syndrome. Oh my gosh, that's me. That was me when I joined the project. The first 3 months, it was like, there's 40 meetings. Let me go to all of them. Oh my gosh, I'm in all of these.
I love meetings.
I love meetings. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I have 40 things I need to do now. Oh no. Yeah, no, we call that the shiny object syndrome. We have it here internally at Google too. It's a thing.
It's real.
Yeah, focus is definitely the key. All right. Well, that is it for February's edition of Meet Our Contributors. Thank you so much to Paul, Nikita, Matt. Thank you so much to Chris Short for stepping in for George. George, I hope you're feeling well if you're listening to this. And that's it. This is the same time next month. What's next month? March. I think that's in a calendar year. And we will see you on Slack. That is Meet Our Contributors and panelists, if you could stay with us after we stop streaming. And Chris, we're out. Press that big red button. See y'all next month.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Chris, can you hear us? Chris is like, hey, I'm still going to stream everybody at the end. Maybe we could have possibly lost him. But,
Are we going to keep streaming forever?
I know, right? Are we going to keep? Yeah, we are still live.
Do we live in YouTube now?
We now live in YouTube, everybody. We now.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just going to kill the Zoom because Chris is having some problems. So we're just going to live here forever. All right. Now I'm killing the Zoom. Bye, everybody.
Will we dream?